Hello there and welcome. Today I'm going to share my most important settings for wildlife videography with the Canon R5. If you're a seasoned professional, this may not help you, but if you are new to using the R5 or just looking for ways to improve your video quality, there might be some valuable information here for you. I not only use these settings for wildlife, I use them for all video that I take with this camera, and I absolutely love the results. So let's get into this. The first bit of overall advice that I can offer is to always shoot in manual mode. This includes ISO and white balance. I change these settings on the fly using the Q button on the back of the camera when I'm out in the field. The only auto anything I use on this camera is autofocus because it's really good. Everything else is manual. Every time, all the time. By far, the best setting for video on this camera, in my opinion, is 4K Fine, or 4K HQ as some call it. I don't deliver in 8K, so I don't use any 8K settings on this camera. And 4K Fine is essentially 8K scaled down to 4K, since it uses the entire 8K sensor with no cropping or line skipping. I use IPB since it gives me a tremendous amount of record time while maintaining high quality. All I takes up a lot more space and I don't notice a quality difference. Once I dial in my 24p setting, I save it to C3 so that it engages when I hit the record button, even when I'm in photo mode. The only other setting that I save to C2 is 4K 60 in case I need some slow motion, but the quality pales in comparison to the 24p 4K Fine, so I use that 99% of the time. I set my sound recording level somewhere near the center and just leave it there. Although I do believe in shooting in log on some occasions, I almost always stick with a custom picture profile that I dial in. I feel like this gives me a more natural look than when I shoot in log settings. I start with landscape mode, and I take my sharpness strength down to the 3rd notch, contrast down to the 2nd notch, saturation down to the 3rd notch, and I leave the color tone in the center. This makes post-production a breeze. All I do is add a little bit of contrast and saturation, and I'm done. I keep my auto power off temperature set to high, and standby set to low res. I've been using this camera for a year and a half and I have never had it overheat. The autofocus on this camera is incredible, and I use the face subject tracking setting for nearly everything. These are the settings I select for movie servo AF speed. I disable all autofocus methods except for tracking, zone AF, and 1-point AF, since I never use anything but those 3. And to be honest, I use face tracking nearly all the time. I disable the screen touch and drag settings since I use my eyepiece a lot and tend to bump the screen with my nose, which changes the focus setting, and instead set my focus point settings to the joystick. I add my most used menu options to my menu, which allows me to access them quickly when needed. In the Customize Buttons menu, I change the AF on button to Pause Movie Servo AF, which allows me to pause autofocus once it's locked on. This prevents autofocus from hunting once it's locked onto an object that isn't moving closer or further away from the camera. I set the AF point button to AF point selection, which allows me to change the type of autofocus mode if needed. I change the multifunction button to still movie switching, which allows me to quickly toggle back and forth between photo and video mode. This camera should have been set this way from the factory, but I digress. I set the Set button to Set AF, point to center, which allows me to quickly center the autofocus point when needed. As I mentioned previously, I set the multi-controller joystick to Direct AF point selection, which allows me to move the autofocus point when needed. If you always use this camera in manual mode, and take advantage of the Q button on the back, which allows you to quickly access things like image stabilization, white balance, picture profile, volume controls, and much more, you will have this camera mastered in no time and start taking amazing looking videos that will last a lifetime. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. See you on the next one.